good afternoon for those of you on the West Coast. I guess the East Coast. If you're on the West Coast, then good morning. Thank you for joining us this Saturday. I am Rustin Zarkar, or Rastin Zarkar, the Middle East and Islamic Studies librarian at the University of North Carolina at Chapel Hill. I'm pleased to be with you today to introduce a fascinating panel. As you may know, this academic year, we have several panels focusing on Iranian diaspora authors, their struggles, accomplishments, and ways they negotiate their diasporic position while writing in their respective host nations. This virtual lecture series is dedicated to exploring how Iranian diaspora authors reflect on the community's attempts at carving out forms of belonging to their host nations. Authors and discussants address specific modes of power and representation that Iranian diaspora community has developed to rehabilitate their position as members of a minoritized population with ambivalent feelings of belonging. Our moderator today is our own Dr. Claudia Yaghoobi. Claudia is a Roshan Associate Professor and the inaugural Director of Persian Studies at the University of North Carolina at Chapel Hill. Congratulations, Claudia. She is the author of Temporary Marriage in Iran, Gender and Body Politics in Modern Iranian Literature and Film, Cambridge University Press, 2020, and Subjectivity in Attar, Persian Sufism and European Mysticism, Purdue University Press. And she's also the editor for the Me Too movement in Iran, reporting sexual violence and harassment, forthcoming from Bloomsbury and IB Taurus in 2023. Dr. Yaghoobi's third book, titled Multiple Consciousness, Transnationalism in Iranian Armenian Cultural Productions, is under review, and a fourth book titled The Ideal Islamic Beauty, Queered, is in progress. So for our audience members today, please feel free to use the Q&A button at the bottom of your screen to post your questions. Claudia will address as many of the questions as possible after a brief discussion between Dr. Yaghoobi and our guest today. So before handing it over to Dr. Yaghoobi, I would like to thank UNC Persian Studies, the Department of Asian and Middle Eastern Studies, and the Center for Middle East and Islamic Studies that have co-sponsored and made this event possible. So thank you all for joining us today. Claudia, the virtual floor is yours.
Thank you so much, Rustin, and thank you, Abdurrahman, our intern in the center, helping us with the organization and logistics of the event. So today I am honored to introduce one of my favorite diaspora Iranian authors, Omid Fallahazad. Born and raised in Shiraz, Iran, Omid Fallahazad is a bilingual fiction writer who immigrated to the US in 2001. His 2016 novel in Farsi, Gahware Div, The Cradle of the Beast, published by Nakuja Publishers in Paris, explores the taboo subject of the house-burning riots against Baha'is in Shiraz on the eve of the 1978 revolution. His other works in Farsi include a collection of short stories, Setir Baran, Dar Sedastan, 3 Executions in 3 Stories, published by H&S Media Publications in 2016, and a best-selling young adult novella, Razi, published by Madrasa Publishers in 2001, now in its 10th print. Most recently, he has published Wartgez, published by Mehri Publications in 2019, which is an acclaimed book of 3 dark humor tales dealing with the life of a middle-aged Armenian bachelor from Iran who lives in Watertown, Massachusetts. In 2004, Omid's Iran-Iraq war story, Raftegan va Mandegan, The Departed and the Living, was shortlisted in the first Bahram Sadeghi Literary Contest. Arrested, another short story of his in English, won an award in the renowned literary journal Glimmer Train and appeared in its fall 2016 issue. Omid's other stories in English have appeared in publications such as Paul Revere's Horse and Word Literature Today And in anthologies like Tremors, new fiction by Iranian American writers, and My Shadow is My Skin, voices from the Iranian diaspora. His most recent work, a pandemic-themed short story titled The Rabbit's Head, has been published in the literary journal Toasted Cheese. He is currently working on Wartgez in LA, a long story sequel to Wartgez in Watertown. Omid lives near Boston, Massachusetts. Welcome to our panel and to UNC, Omid Jan.
Hello, thank you, and thank you for hosting the panel. And I'm delighted to be part of this series and ready to answer the questions.
Thank you so much. So I'm going to start with my own questions because I'm kind of selfish. I want to use this time and ask my own questions first, and then I will go to the audience's questions. So first of all, I am curious to know what inspires your writing, your books, and where do your ideas come from? And kind of if you can tell us what your writing process is as a diaspora author.
Gosh, I mean, what inspires my writing, or I think anyone's writing, could be many things. But in my case, I would say one source is forms, and to be more precise, narrative forms. Anything that has some niftiness or cleverness in the way it's going to be narrated, or its manifestation in the language in form of either images or emotions that it can evoke. So if you take that, then that starts that feeling, that itch that you don't want to write about that thing. I mean, I just call it a thing at this point. I think this is maybe true also about many other artworks, that we look at the painters or fine artists that for generation after generation, they repeatedly over and over, they painted the same scene from the Greek mythology or the Old Testament, and what inspired them sometimes to me is just that accumulation or that capsulation of emotions and actions frozen in one still image. It's the same thing for me. I think about the personal histories that I hear from friends, from relatives, memories that we revisit. As you said, in diaspora, they're very, in terms of contrast, they're very palpable. And then that's where the inspiration starts. And then, of course, you try to, navigate ways to how you want to tell your own story and give it a fresh or new look and impact. There are other things. Again, it's not just that, but that's major for me. Like I'm thinking about, my most recent work, this The Rabbit's Head. The germ of that, the inspiration of that was from a afternoon walk with my daughter on a rainy day. And when I mentioned niftiness, just a couple of lines of exchange between me and her about worms. And here we go. Then I have something that I latch on and I start building around that and tell the story. And as I said, it's not limited to those moments or those parts, but that's a big component for many of them.
Thank you. So you mentioned personal stories of both yourself and your friends or people around you, as you just talked about, your conversation with your daughter. Mm-hmm. So what other personal experiences or real life sources do you draw on for writing? Like, are there anything from your homeland of Iran that, you bring in your writing? Are there anything from your family background that come up in your books.
Exactly. I mean, when I said that, is there's always an emotional draw, or sometimes a moral conflict that it's laced with all those emotions, conflicting emotions, and they come forth when you think about memories of either trauma or absolute sense of safety in the homeland. So we are in this pendulum of thinking of awful things that happened to us or to some other people that we witnessed, all the way to the moments that we think that was the best, most joyous, safest place that I've ever been, home. And when you say, well, what did it draw from? So it's those memories that kind of, you think you carry them, but it's like they lead you. They tell you what to think, what to expect, and how to feel about even your future and your presence here in diaspora. Yes, constantly. I belong to a minority, extremely persecuted in Iran. So anything happened to us, even to others, not directly to me, I have it there, and I cannot not think about them or not say things about them. So they're there, their presence, and they, as I said, there's always struggle between me as a writer and them as a writer of my identity, to what we need to make of them. In my case, in terms of artwork, for other people could be academic work, could be their approach to their activism. So it is, again, it's a cliche to say, like, a tip of iceberg is here, but the big chunk of it is what we left there and constantly reflect on. So yes, yeah, personal stories, again, myself, people around me, people that I know and people I care about, all the way to those people that we kind of sympathize with. Like, you think about Afghanistan or Syria. I've never been there, but my experiences in Iran, I don't want to say it allows me, it kind of forces me to have feelings for those images, for those stories, for things that are unfolding there. Mm-hmm. And then they form my literary career. I write about those things. Again, to make it short, also, I want to add this part about them reflected in the mirror, which is us here. Like, Bart is living here, but thinks about what happened in Abadan or to his brother in Basra. So they go hand in hand.
So, yeah, as you mentioned, as a minoritized population in Iran from the Baha'i community, and then being on the margins of the society, and then coming to the United States, still being a minority here, this is a space filled with, friction, and can be very challenging to navigate, as you just mentioned. Do you have a medium? Do you have an advice? How do you do it? Can you tell to authors who are, in a similar position to yours?
Again, something about this, like the third space, or we writing about it, or maybe creating it. I don't know if we're creating it. Is it there, or we just write about it? I like to say that I believe any culture that writes stories in a modern sense, produces literature in a modern sense, it's constantly doing that, creating that third space, and goes for that hybridity in identity. If they do that, they may not have a home versus host or home versus exile, contrast or back and forth, but they have, like, for example, past and present, or like with the racial issues in the United States, but they deal with something that they need to create third space and move to that hybrid hopefully more just, future. For us, again, it's a little bit hard to self-analyze and bring that angle or lens and keep thinking about that. But I think this attempt is something that we cannot avoid. I am not here. I think about the moments that I feel that, okay, I'm with American friends and I'm responding to what is supposed to be a current subject in our conversation. What happens on the streets of Boston, for example? The thing is that undercurrent, I feel this lava, this burning lava of feelings and reaction and memories that's kind of detached from that, correct? Detached from my American being. So I have that discussion with friends. I react to things that are around us or from my daughter's school. But then in the news, I see something about Afghanistan or Iran or Syria, as we kept saying, and that is moving and it bubbles up. The moments that those bubbling emotions meet the surface, sometimes they come together in the form of what we call, for example, a short story or a painting or a movie. Then we have something to say that's relevant in both of them, but it's not exactly, you cannot categorically say this belongs to this person who lives in Watertown feeling about Watertown, or this belongs to this person who lives in Abadan. This belongs to that third space, as you said, thinking about both of them and reacting about to both of those to make sense of them. It's a feeling of, I don't want to portray that negatively, but it's a feeling of constantly being lost, but always hopeful that you find your way. And this is maybe what makes this writing or any form of artistic expression for people like us more exciting. I believe in that, and more meaningful.
So part of the reason I appreciate your work a lot is because you bring in all these, different perspectives. You're not living in a dual position of Iran and America. And that's why I think you are more of a transnational author than a diasporic author. Would you agree with that label?
I think so. I think in terms of the content of what I write, that's apparent there, that you see that the character is uh, thinking about these things beyond nationality. It sees that as an existential question. What am I supposed to do with this situation? Not as an American or as Iranian, but as Iranian American or Armenian Iranian American, and a combination of all. And the fears, the comedy that comes with it, that looks like farce, in the 21st century, it's just interesting to talk about and write about. It's just it's yummy writing material. Think about that. Yes, I believe so. And also, to look at it from different angle, the fact that I write in English and I try to write in English and publish in English, but I also have this constant, production in Farsi, because I can't let go of that either. It's there and I have to write them, and I hopefully get them published, and few people who are interested, they read them, and there's a readership and conversation. That's also interesting, again, to watch, me being one of the many people who are trying this trend. Yes, we are transnational, I believe.
So do you make a conscious decision in what language to write, or is it just the way that stories come in that language?
It's a really good question. It's very, it it differs. I mean, there are moments that its whole story or idea comes and you feel it, that it's in English happening in your head, and you have it in English, like the one that I mentioned, the rabbit's head, was in English originally. I wrote it in English, and now it's out in English. But I also translated that to Farsi and had it published in Farsi. But to me, that was an English. Why? It's so hard to explain. I don't know. At that moment, it's not that I feel at that moment I'm completely English thinking and I'm an, pure American, and that's what I can write about. It's not that, but it takes hold of you that the story wants to be told with those colors that only comes into that language in the first place. And for Farsi, again, I keep referring to this culinary parts, but it's like the taste, the flavor, everything. It just dictates itself that I'm in Farsi. Vargas is in Farsi in the first place. I mean, it can be translated to English or Armenian eventually, but what it does, what it thinks, and how it reacts has a lot to do with my Farsi lens of seeing things or experiencing things. Mm-hmm. So yes, and there are some conscious, of course, calculation. Eventually, as a writer, you understand the limits and you look for the prospects of what the work needs to do. Yeah, there are some calculation to say, yeah, this is good in Farsi, but can I try it in English? But I think that's slim. That's a small part of it.
Do you think about your audience?
Do I? I probably yes, but the characters, the stories are way more powerful to push me to write them. But I have a lot of unpublished work. So that means I really didn't think about how I can get them published. And my experience in Iran, again, coming from the minority background, for years, I wrote without being able to publish, knowing that my story in the Bahram Sadeghi, competition, I wrote that when I was 19. So there are years later that it was published. Did I think about who's going to read this? I don't know at the moment. I had the story, but I like to think about them as a motivation, and sometimes it's confusing and frustrating, and sometimes it's very rewarding. Yeah, if I think about them writing Vargas, the people that I know, they're going to read it, and they have these reactions and get validation about, did I portray this correctly? Does it make an impact, and so forth. And then there are moments that you get kind of frustrated. Am I going to, quote unquote, satisfy these expectations from, you name it. I mean, whoever is the hypothetical reader. And then, yeah, it's again, it's a mix feeling to think about the readers and readership. Mm-hmm. But I respect them. So that's all that matters, I think.
I know you do, because for the audience who don't know, I actually wrote an article about Omid's book Vargas in Watertown, and the article will be out soon, hopefully. But let's talk about Vargas a little bit.
Okay, yeah.
There's a part in the story that I like a lot, which is somewhere Vargas responds to someone and says, and I'm translating the Persian, he says, I'm Iranian. Honestly, I was born in Iraq. My parents were Armenian. Then my father took me to Iran and was forced to get an Iranian birth certificate for me. But in reality, I'm Armenian. And he goes on and on talking about, what would happen to him? Would he be taken to court for what? Betrayer, rioter, terrorist, American, Iraqi, Iranian, or Armenian? This is the part where he talks about himself when he is singing the American anthem as he's becoming, a citizen of America. And he is reflecting on his own identity, and he doesn't know whether or not he is American, Iraqi, Iranian, or Armenian, and all the charged concepts like terrorist, rioter, betrayer that come with all these nationalities. So who is Vargas?
I think you picked the a good sample of what he's going through, and maybe that is a good start to think about Vargas. Sometimes I think Vargas is all of us, or all of us have some Vargas in ourselves. When facing, for one thing, facing the possibility of losing what we think is our either freedom or identity, losing it because of ridiculous things that we have no control over. So in case of Vargas, he's constantly have to deal with, external or expectations that obviously are external pose on him, that he has to decide, who am I? He wants to be Vargas, but there are certain expectations that Vargas as an Armenian has to think or act certain ways. As an Iranian, has to think and have certain memories that he cares about, or he should care about. And as American, he should, conform to what's expected as a new American. And yet, he has no control over, for example, his own appearance. He hasn't decided that his hair or mustache looks this way. And this is the part that seems unfair to him. Add to that, this cocktail of character of being gentle at the same time, being a bachelor. So that means by making him bachelor, or thinking about the person who's bachelor, I take out all support system that may help define an identity, give support to that. If you're a father, if you're a husband, and then it kind of magnifies that challenge. Even in that sense, he's constantly, they pushed on him the expectation of what do you want to do. And then if he has like erotic feelings or sexual feelings as a young person towards, like a homosexual feelings, he has to explain that to himself or to others as well. Or when he faces even death, he's thinking, well, again, the third story is about the way they prepare a body for burial, which has a lot to do with identity. Every single one of us, I think no one confessed to that, but that's one of the most important parts that are decided for us, that how we're going to be buried based on our identity. If I'm a Baha'i, if I'm an Armenian, if I'm a Muslim. And facing that brings that question forward again. Some people think just write about justice and death, and these are major issues. Vargas deals with, hey, as you said, that third space. Who am I first? And I'm trying to, again, some people wash this away and say, forget about it. To me, it's internalized. And we don't say that we are constantly dealing with those layers of identity, which to some extent are who we are. But in many aspects, this is a skin we like to shed. So yeah, again, the details of work is, I think, if anyone's interested, hopefully they can read the book, and hopefully the sequel will come out and explains more. So.
Yeah, for the audience who have not read the story, there's so much emphasis in the story on U.S. citizenship, which Vargas is constantly delaying, and his friends advise him that it's important to become a U.S. citizen because his nationality is currently stamped Iranian in his passport. because in passports, they don't write Armenian Iranian, it's just Iranian. And that it doesn't matter if he's Armenian or non-Armenian, the passport says Iranian. And this is specifically important because the story is reflecting on the particular Islamophobia after 9/11, which targeted the people of the Middle Eastern descent and racialized them in a way on matters of religion and the increasing visibility of non-white and non-black, basically brown ethno-racial minoritized groups such as Iranians in the US. Now, Wartgez is not in the category of Islamophobia. However, from Iran, he can be categorized as in the story. So there's so much nuance there. And in the story, when he goes for, his citizenship, what is it?
Ceremony, the oath, yep.
Yes, oath ceremony. He's constantly worried that people are going to know that he is from, Iran, because at the same time, the police is looking for someone with this dark hair, dark, complexion, with a mustache and everything that they consider as a terrorist. And the alleged terrorist looks very much so like Wartgez at that moment. So he's challenged and he doesn't know how to, maneuver all of this.
Mm-hmm.
So do you want to speak a little bit about this and why you, picked this moment?
I think thanks for your explanation. Yes, I think the question of if a Middle Eastern person looks like a threat, a terrorist, from the point of view of a non-Middle Eastern person, is not a big concern for me, because thinking about that, this is something that is, in terms of statistics or mathematics of it, the chances are so slim that they can just skip the question. I mean, they look at someone next to them in the airport or somewhere, say, is it a threat or not? And people live with it. The interesting thing, though, is that the question in the mind of the Middle Eastern person as, do I look like that terrorist? Do I invoke those feelings in these people who walk next to me? And you consciously or subconsciously, after many years, constantly react to that. You adjust everything that you do, any word that you say, your accent, it becomes part of you. I mean, sometimes for defiance, you may, if you're Iranian or Arab, you just say the words just to say, look, I'm a safe person and I'm from that land or that region. But overall, we are struggling to get rid of that question in the first place. And I think that story, maybe as comic as it is, was kind of successful because people had same experiences. Maybe not exactly for the moment that they decided to become a citizen of Canada or US or Germany, but other moments that they keep turning around, the lens and the camera, say, what do I look like to them? Mm-hmm. And Vargas, again, in that story, there's more into it because to me, Vargas is even way more interesting. Actually, just makes it a different beast in terms of a story because he's not Iranian per se, he's Armenian. So think about it, like, or me not being, from a majority Muslim from Iran. Think about it. Many of us, or even other Muslim people here, in the first place, we think that we are somewhat subject to the harsh, policies in our homeland. So we are the first group who've been the victim of this way of looking at the universe of, for example, being persecuted and all. Now here, we are again persecuted by being mistaken for those who drove us out. That's what I said. It's a farce. It's a comedy, because now I'm being mistaken with the person who was my own executioner, and that's what the story is about. Or Vargas' challenges in some moments are with that.
So would you like to tell us a little bit about Vargas's adventures in LA?
Oh, okay. I um well, can I say something? Yeah, I say a few facts. So first of all, I hope this is going to be a longer piece. So the other three are three short stories. This one, I hope, is going to be a longer story, not exactly a thick novel, but a short novella. It's going to be dark humor again. It's going to be humor, but real dark parts to it. And other characters are going to be strong in it too. And I feel good about it so far, but I don't know. No one knows. As someone who writes, you never know what it turns out to be. And I have my self-imposed deadlines as well. So I'm hoping by Christmas time I'm done with the piece. I did some research because I don't live there. In my trip, I saw people, friends, those who read the previous books, some coming with the notion that, okay, so you grew up in an Armenian family. And I had to say, no, not really. Or in an Armenian community, no. And again, maybe there's not, probably you know better than me, there's not a lot of Armenian material there. But the character kind of conveys or feels like it's authentic in the right place. I hope I can regenerate that and create that again as he deals with LA Armenian population in Glendale and the drama that unfolds there. So I think that's all I can say for now.
You're right. I haven't personally read any books by any Iranian authors other than Armenian authors themselves, whose main character is Armenian, except for you.
Okay.
And as you know, part of my argument in the article, which I let go of at the end, the final version, was arguing the fact that, just problematizing the fact that another minority author writes about this minority community. It takes another minority to understand a minority population, because, the Iranian Muslim Shia authors didn't pick Armenian characters as their main characters. And when they have, they are minor characters with, with very stereotypical characteristics and features. So that was very interesting. Now, final question before I get to the Q&A, and everyone, please post your questions. I just want to ask a fun fact about a fun fact about you. What is one food that reminds you of home or homeland?
Of food. I mean, there's so many, but one is specific in this season. But my mom her signature food is kalam polosh, which is this is rice and cabbage with tons of herbs that, the aroma is it's crazy. But I think what I picked, though, it's not that one. I think I like to think of khoresht beh, which is stew of quince and maybe with lamb shank. So the sauce that it creates and next to the Persian rice. So I like that when I was going back home from school, and if we had that in fall season, that was special. Yeah.
Wonderful. I've never tried it.
You should. I mean, if my mom cooks that, I should ask her now.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Omid Jan. So, okay, now I'll get to the questions. Someone is asking, you mentioned that your experience in Iran forced you to empathize with people in other countries such as Afghanistan. Could you share more about those experiences? Your own experiences in Iran?
I see.
Yeah.
Okay, so I mean, again, I repeat that I grew up at the time of the revolution, and again, belonging to a minority that was persecuted harshly, constantly, nonstop up to this moment. So any experience there, to me, feels like, again, I haven't been to Afghanistan, but feels like this is how things gonna happen. They gradually, slowly take away simple things that is considered your life, and your men, women, or family, you're forced to this limited life. And again, I'm not going only with the traumatic, graphic pictures of executions. That's one thing. That's one thing that everyone can react to. But that gradual formation of what a jail is supposed to be around people and in their minds, it's something that I have reaction to. My story, my novel Gahware Div, the opening scene is a man, an army man who tried to defend his family and then turned to a violent event. Eventually, the mob killed him, and this is his body in the morgue. And I see that over and over in all those images that comes from Iraq or Libya or in Afghanistan, this clash that has no outlet except violence. So I feel that. Here, people, again, I have colleagues and I respect them, and I have I know so many wonderful Americans. But for us, it's experienced. For them is something happening somewhere which doesn't make sense. To them is a nonsense. To us is the reality. And we both don't like it, but again, we feel it differently. That's they say it in Farsi with pust o stakhan. We feel it with
Our flesh and
our
blood.
flesh, and yeah.
Yeah. I really agree with you. I hated, especially recently, seeing particularly on social media, the romanticization of people in Afghanistan, and then kind of commercializing it, objectifying these images that were coming out of Afghanistan, basically, commercializing the pain of these people. So I definitely agree with you. So our friend Parvane Hosseini is asking you, she says, hi, Omid and Claudia. I enjoyed the conversation a lot. My question for Omid is, how do you deal with tough memories when you need to summon them in order to move forward in your stories?
Parvana, John, I need to, okay, how do I deal with my memories? If you don't mind reading that part of the question again.
How do you deal with tough memories?
Oh, tough memories. Okay, I'm sorry.
Trauma.
It's very difficult. It haunts you. It doesn't go away. And I think you can say that when you read our writings, anyone like me, people like me, you feel that pain is there. So the pain is there as you think about it, as you write about it. But how to deal with it? Oh, I think maybe just by creating something meaningful. There are also on the surface, there are some remedies. Like, for example, I wrote Gahware Di, which is very painful to me. Every standalone chapter is painful. And people tell me, oh, we're crying when we read this. But then I switched to Vargas, which is again very serious and dark, but it's a relief just to write it in a comic environment. So there's that outlet too, the way you pace your projects and you try to be reasonable with your own self as how much I want to go and sink into this. Uh, but at the same time, as I said, it's just maybe the fact that you create in itself, it's a blessing, but doesn't necessarily mean that you don't feel the pain. It doesn't numb you. It's the other way around. You become very tender, and again, you're right. You have to deal with it, but I don't have an exact, final answer to that. But I think the fact that you write and hope that people read, and then you write again, maybe eases that a little bit.
Thank you. And Mehrak Kamali is asking, first, I like Vargas a lot. I believe he can be an icon in our literature. More than his Armenian origin, he's a pure human like Prince Meshkin in Dostoevsky. Dostoevsky's Idiot, or Pierre Bezokhov in Tolstoy's War and Peace, who deserve to be as famous as Dash Akol. For example, in the first story of Vargas' stories, the writer puts Vargas in the intersection of three nationalities: Armenian, Iraqi, and Iranian. Dr. Yaghoobi described Fallahazad as a transnational writer. The same Vargas became a global citizen who can understand the challenges of the other, although it's a heavy duty on his shoulders. I think it's a comment rather than a question. So as a transnational author, you have created a transnational character. I think that
again, thank you, yeah, for the commentary. Yeah, I hope so. I hope that it's read that way and understood that way.
There's a question from my student Andrew Withrow. Are there certain ideas, concepts, or feelings that you can only express adequately in your native Farsi? How so?
That's a good question. To think that anything, homegrown or local can be absolutely universal, yeah, I don't believe in that. So then logically I have to answer, I think yes, there are certain things and sentiments that's more meaningful when expressed in a native language. But it's more than just a phrase or language. It's just going back to that form or narrative form. Certain things work in certain cultures with the real impact, and not so much in in a universal way. So yes, I should say yes, but it's so hard to pick examples. I think maybe that's one of the reasons that certain cultures or literary cultures, they are wonderful and they are, like glowing diamonds, but they don't become as a trend. I'm not sure. I mean, people may disagree with me, but I remember, for example, I had that conversation with the gentleman from Germany who knew Germany had wonderful modern literature, but he also was claiming that there's a limit to its reach. I don't know the detail of how to analyze that, and there's the other way around. Then you have waves of certain type of literature that take over everything for generations, like Latin America, comes forth with what they produce. You may like it or not, but they're dominant for a while. And so the same thing is true about when you said about language. I know it changed maybe the topic, but going back to that event, to the building block of the ideas and what we put together as literature or art form, of course, there are things that make more sense, or as I said, they work much better in the native language with its own readership. There are stories that I can tell and move Iranian people living in Iran, reading in Farsi, that someone here, if it's published here, was saying, so what? And I think maybe the other way around, I'm not sure. So I don't know. I can't pick things here that are appreciated, but maybe for Farsi readers, we're not that concerned about that.
Thank you. Another student of mine, Fiona Chen, is asking, which of your books would you say was the most enjoyable to write? What was that journey like?
Well, each one has a different story. I think the novel took me, a few years to put together. And I had different pieces of that. That was a very different experience compared to the collection of short stories, was things that happened throughout the years. I have a story here, another here, and then I put them together. I think I liked Vargas so far best. The flow, the way it feels natural to myself. And but sometimes it's just like the character that you write about. So then it brings the joy. Has challenges too. I mean, you're constantly facing the challenge of what am I doing? It's getting soggy in places, but I think my pick would have been Vargas.
All right. So Neda Ahmadian is asking, what are the best books you have read so far? One in Persian and one in English, maybe?
Oh my goodness! Wow, a hard question. I have to categorize. I don't go back, like I don't talk about classics like, say, Iliad or maybe Shakespeare. If I come to modern time, one thing that I can enjoy at any moment, I think maybe James Joyce's Dubliners. It's just so succulent in every line. I mean, you can eat that book. And Farsi. Whew. There's so many. But again, I have so many writers, generation before us, writers from Shiraz. But I think I'm gonna go with. That's a hard question. Can I just at least name a short story or two?
Yeah.
If you tell me right now, pick a short story, I will read Gada, Beggar by Ghulam Hussain Saidi, or I can read Saqatre Khun, Hidayat, at any moment, anytime. There's so many though, but those two, you can enjoy that, anytime.
So following up, Neda is asking, apart from yourself, any other Iranian authors you admire or have they have had influence on you?
When you say a part of myself, I don't admire myself, but but oh yes, a lot. First of all, again, when I was 18, 19, I was fortunate to get to know Shahryar Mandanipur and other writers in Shiraz, Abu Turab Khosravi, Muhammad Keshavarz, and learn a lot from them. I like their works and I believe in their works. Then Moniru Ravanipur wasn't there, but we learned a lot from reading her short stories and her work and her novel. And then that generation who, believe it or not, I mean, just, I don't want to take that long, but I want to explain that at that point, you have to imagine we're living in a desert culturally, in terms of colors of what life could mean. There's nothing there. Everything's limited. And you have this on one side, and then you have this torrential downpour of trauma. I mean, you have the war, you have the soldiers, you have the funeral burial ceremonies of 200 bodies, marching down the street. You have these, And the only thing that we had, some people, older generation, they like the poetry from the, contemporary poetry in Iran. Our generation, we had short stories. And this is where these people come from. That's the only thing that we had. And this gave us that inner life that we needed so much to survive. And those of us who were reading short story, and that's why you see this thing mushroomed in 2 decades later. Everyone wants to be a writer in Iran, every young person, because that was the only thing that we had. And there were other writers, Asghar Abdullahi, all that generation, Qazi Rabihavi, Farrokhfal, not so much. I mean, they had thin books, few stories. That was enough for us to read them over and over. Now, of course, the older masters like Bahram Beizai and others in other fields, but that's all we had. So I admire them all the time. I think about Saftaris, for example, just top. So I admire every single one of them.
So Esha Momeni is saying, thank you so much for the thought-provoking discussion. Do you know the plot before writing the story, or the story evolves as you write?
Well, these are good conversation for a separate panel, but I don't want to go there. I think it's a constant back and forth between what plot kind of is, even if in a very pale, drawing, kind of where it goes, but then images or feelings that you capture here or there to put together emphasize certain lines and maybe force some changes too. Like for Vargas right now, I know where it ends, what happens. I know that mechanic and dynamic of, it's kind of the engineering of it is kind of done. However, the exact touch is subject to change based on, believe it or not, if I close this laptop, or if I go for a walk, or I drive my car and something comes here and say, this goes there and I fit it there, changes a little bit of the plot. So you have to arrange everything again to fit that in. That itself makes the plot stronger, but at the same time, it tells you it's not written on stone. So
when are you happy? Like, when are you satisfied with a story? Because every minute something can emerge, right? And you would like to change parts of a project that is in progress.
So what I said in the beginning, what inspires me, there are something germinated already in terms of form of the narrative. There are some exact turns and twists and clashes that are essential to the story. So because they don't change, the more they feel authentic and they feel well developed, the more satisfied I get. Like for the first story of Vargas, I knew someone would say something to him, and his simple reaction causes this turmoil in the whole, hall, in the place that is supposed to, everything is security. So that's there. How it comes to happen, the details, as I said, when I write down and I write that woman and her color and how she looks, and then this reaction all of a sudden, then I'm more and more satisfied. But to be okay, let's just put it this way: when the details are what I want, details bring the satisfaction. Plot we all have. We have good ideas about stories. Do I have the right details for that plot? And that's where, I think the satisfaction comes when you have the right, that niftiness that I said.
Well, that was our final question, and I will therefore hand it back to Rustin.
Thank you so much, Dr. Yaghoobi and Omid. It was a wonderful conversation. And thank you to all of our audience members today. We really appreciated you having us enter your virtual space on a Saturday. If you are interested in this virtual series, we do have another event on November 20th. And actually, you heard one of the participants, Esha Momeni's question. She will be moderating the panel with the author Fereshte Molavi, and that will be on November 20th at around noon to 1 p.m. So please join us again for that conversation as well. Thank you all so much, and we wish you a good day.
Thank you.
Thank you again. Thank you, Dr. Yaghoobi. Thank you, Rostin. Thanks, everyone.